Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Guest of Honor, Minister of Home Affairs as Deputy Chairman of ANBD, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Hanisah from the FinTech office of ANBD, and welcome to the Fireside Chat session. So from here, I can tell everyone is looking a bit restless. So can everyone please join me, stand up for a bit, and let's just stretch our legs. We've been sitting down for like 2 hours now. So everybody maybe can just stand up, let's stretch a bit. I know it's almost the end of the session today, but yes, bear with me. Okay, so let's just stretch, stand up, okay, and everyone please be seated. Okay, so if everyone can recall this morning in his keynote address, Yang Berhormat Pihin mentioned that there's no better word to describe the year 2020 than unprecedented. But hearing from the sessions today, we can also tell that while we are living in unprecedented times, this year has also been quite transformative. I came across an article on The Economist recently on the top trends to watch out for in 2021. So I know from this year, predictions can go way wrong. But just hear me out. According to The Economist, one trend to look out for in 2021 is on taxeleration. I think Yang Berhormat Pihin touched on this, on how the pandemic has forced us to shift towards online learning. And Huwaida also mentioned how she went online shopping more this year. So for me, personally, my most frequently used apps during COVID-19, apart from Brew Health, were those of food deliveries, which sadly resulted in COVID-19 wave. It's a real thing. But I digress. You see, all these changes, online learning, online shopping, all these changes took place which we probably expected to happen probably in a decade from now. It happened overnight or within weeks. So that's what The Economist meant by taxeleration. So in this next session, I will talk more on this with three esteemed guests from the industry. We've got Irwan, who heads the retail banking unit in the local Islamic bank BIBD. And we also have two guests from the FinTech space. We have Ajit, co-founder of leading peer-to-business financing Validus in Singapore, joining us virtually. Hi, Ajit. Can you hear us?
Hi, Hanisah. Thanks for having me.
And we also have Denny, co-founder of Beep. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Like I said, the year 2020, it has been truly extraordinary. It has defined by the pandemic. But my first question, probably just to kickstart this session, by the way, it's a fireside chat session. There'll be no presentations. It'll just be a conversation among the four of us over here. So just to kickstart, how did COVID-19 affect your company and your customers? So maybe we can start with Irwan from the bank side.
Thank you, Hanisah. Assalamualaikum, Yang Berhormat Pihin, ladies and gentlemen. The COVID-19 started in Brunei, was first detected on 9th of March. I think I remember at the time when it was first announced, so there was less walk-in into the branches. We also gradually noted that our overseas card transaction has dropped. It is still low at the moment due to the travel restrictions. But the good thing is that we do not see any panic buying. We were monitoring our ATM withdrawals at that time, so there was no unusual activities. I think that's a good thing as well. But we also noted that there was an uptick in adoptions of digital channels, e-wallet services. There was also an increase in requests for merchant registrations, card terminals. Basically, yeah, those are the key.
That's good. I think you mentioned during the pandemic, there were restrictions going on, so people couldn't maybe go to the physical branches. But for fintech companies, I think that's something, that's out of the question because fintechs are already operating digitally. So maybe for Ajit, maybe you can answer this one. Like, how has the impact been different for fintechs? Maybe you would want to share also Singapore's experience in terms of the pandemic.
Sure. Thanks, Hanisah, once again for having me on your session. Very, very interesting session, and I really look forward to having chats with Denny and Irwan as well. Coming to the pandemic, Hanisah, clearly it has impacted everybody in every single country. So Singapore and our customers and us as a company are no exception to that, to what has happened. I think what has happened has been unprecedented. And clearly it has impacted our customers in a manner that we have never seen before, nor projected ever in our lives. I think the important thing in this pandemic from our customers, and we have two sets of customers, Hanisah, as a fintech P2P platform. We have our customers who borrow from us, the SMEs who borrow from us, and we have a second set of customers, are the investors who invest in these deals through our platform. So both have been affected in different manners. From an SME customer perspective, Hanisah, clearly they have been impacted severely because, as you know, the SMEs are the lowest end of the pecking order in supply chains, and therefore a pandemic as serious as this has impacted them quite severely. I think from our perspective as a platform, it has been very, very important and critical that in this very, very difficult time for our SME customers, we stand by them. And that's what we try to do in our Singapore business, in our Indonesia business, in our Vietnam business. We have been standing by our customers and supporting them through this very, very difficult times that they have faced. Let me give you a simple example. We have a customer in Indonesia who borrows from us, who was an apparel manufacturer. Obviously, his business was suffering. Now, through our efforts to support him, we managed to pivot him from supplying T-shirts, which had no demand, to making PPE outfits, the personal protection equipment, apparels for hospitals, and therefore did stuff like that to do whatever we could to support our customers. And just an example of this kind of stuff we have done, Hanisah. As a company, as a P2P platform, Validus is the largest P2P SME lender in Singapore. And clearly, we've also had to personally tighten our belts as a company to be able to withstand this COVID at a company level and preserve as much cash as we possibly could to be able to withstand this pandemic for the next 12 to 18 months as well.
Well, okay, thank you, Ajit. I think Ajit mentioned a good point there about how fintechs help the community and everything. For Beep, Denny, I was talking to you before during the registration. Your company was focusing last year. Your company was focusing on enabling businesses to receive payments from Alipay, and your hope was to leverage on Chinese tourists coming into the country. So obviously, the pandemic this year has changed dynamics of that. And I saw in this year's papers that you somehow help the community instead, helping people, providing that platform for our local sellers at the gerai in Gadong to sell. So maybe you can elaborate more.
Sure. Thanks, Hanisah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So maybe just to share, we've been an acquirer for Alipay since last year, and I think we're also operating within the sandbox parameters. And when COVID hit, I think one of the first impact that we saw was a significant drop in transactions that we had. So overnight, I think because the closure of the borders, flights starting not to come to Brunei anymore, especially from China, we saw a 90% decrease in transactions overnight. So that really took a hit on us. But I think as a company, as a startup, as a fintech startup, we actually have a roadmap of products and solutions that we've been working on pre-COVID. So I mean, we've been very heavy on development as a startup. We do a lot of prototyping, coming up with solutions. So one of the things that we worked on also was our e-commerce digital engine. And I think, Hanisah, you mentioned that one of the things that we rolled out during the month of Ramadan was that we actually helped digitize the Pasar Gadong, Pasar PBG, so it's called. So what that entailed was us giving digital solutions to the merchants there. And bear in mind, these solutions, or rather these vendors, these merchants, they've been operating very traditionally over the past 20, 30 years. So it's a very brick and mortar type operations that they have. They go to Pasar to sell their products, to sell their goods, and it's very cash driven. So one of the first things that we could enable these guys to operate on was e-commerce marketplace. So I mean, it's nothing too sophisticated. It's just a website for a start. It's an ongoing initiative that we're working on currently. But back then, what we provided for the vendors was a mobile dashboard, so they can start accepting orders through online channels, accepting digital payments as well through a payment gateway. And I think we actually found a lot of interesting takeaways from our deployment at the Pasar PBG, Pasar Gadong initiative. So one of the things that we had learned was that they are actually very inclined towards technology. So now they've taken on a mobile dashboard, being able to accept online payments. So it's about customizing solutions for these specific use cases that we go into. So that's one of the interesting takeaways. And I think I mentioned that it's an ongoing current initiative that we're working on. So I mean, if you have time to drop by our booth today, we can show you some of our prototypes, some of our solutions that we have that we are hoping to roll out into the market. And everything today is very technology-driven, mobile-centric type solutions. So I think for the vendors, for the merchants, for the micro sellers, we want to enable them to be on mobile devices, on smart devices, to not only take on payments acceptance, but also to see how we can facilitate the other components of the value chain that will lead onto payments eventually.
Thanks, Denny. I love that how you shared how some of the initiatives help to empower local SMEs, help them to upgrade digitally. I think that's a very remarkable initiative, and we couldn't have done it without, COVID-19. So there's always a silver lining to behind COVID-19. I think we've heard in earlier sessions also about the profound changes in technological behavior. So maybe Irwan, MasterCard did a survey this year looking at the implications of the pandemic. 82% of the respondents worldwide viewed contactless as the cleaner way to pay, and 74% said they will continue to use contactless payments. So perhaps you can share, during the pandemic and even now, based on your customers, bank customers, is this something you also observe during the pandemic? And, maybe you can share first.
Yeah, thank you. I mentioned earlier that overseas card transaction has gone down more than 90%. But overall, we have noted for the year 2020, our overall card transaction volume has gone up by more than 50%. So card adoption has gone up. Card transaction value, the drop in overseas transaction has been, offsetted by increase in domestic spending as well. So that's gone up by about 28%. Our e-wallet solutions, Quick Pay, we've noted that thanks to the pandemic, there's about 200% increase in the digital transactions as well. Our next gen mobile applications, we have already at the moment 80% adoption rate. So 80% of our customers have next gen. So this year we have seen a further 23% increase in registration, new registrations. So in terms of the transactions that's transacted over our mobile app, this year we're looking at about $1.5 billion. That's quite a huge amount for a population of about 400,000. So when we talk about digital adoptions, definitely the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated acceptance rate earlier during the previous panels, we were talking about decashing the economy and reducing the dependency on hard cash. So there's some interesting statistics. For the first time in BIBD in 2020, we've seen our ATM cash withdrawal drop by about 7%. That's our estimate for this year. So far, it's dropping. We're also seeing CDM deposits dropping by about 4%, and CQM is about by 15%. So there is that significant shift from a cash economy into a more digital based economy, and we do see that our customers are more and more ready to accept digital payment systems. Yeah.
Okay, that's very encouraging to hear. But I bet the question on everyone's mind now, what happens after this acceleration? I mean, how much will things snap back? Which behaviors will outlast the pandemic? So maybe if you could hear from Denny, what are your thoughts? Like, how are you planning to take advantage of this digital rush? I mean, in Brunei, we've started our de-escalation measures, so businesses are returning to normal, people are moving about already, but we don't want to lose that rush that people are using all these digital solutions and everything. So how do you respond to that for Beep?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think for us, we are looking at solutions to build on top of payments because payments itself does not happen in isolation. So there's a lot of things or components that happens or actions that happens before they actually hit payments. So I think we are designing a lot of bespoke, customized solutions. We've been in the marketplace for about a bit more than a year now. So we have been serving merchants, businesses with our payment solutions. But I think what that enabled us to do was to understand maybe some of their pain points that they're facing today. So we actually went back to the drawing board and see what else can we provide or what else can we facilitate these guys with, looking at the whole scheme of the transactional value chain. So for us, I think rightly so as well. I think how we want to take advantage of this accelerated digitization process is to see how we can further make it convenient and further enhance the customer experience, mostly particularly on the consumer side. I think there was an interesting remark made by the CEO of Microsoft in one of the previous sessions a couple of days back. He mentioned that consumers. He mentioned a term where it's. He mentioned customer obsession. So that I really took that into literally to see how for us it's always been serving our merchants who are our customers to enable them to serve their customers better. So what that means, and he mentioned that it's feeling that level of empathy to your customers. So customers today are becoming very more complex, very more sophisticated. So no longer are the days where it's enough to just roll out a website or an e-commerce website and get your customers to transact through that particular channel. So it's about getting that customer experience right to enable them to repeatedly come back to your particular platform, for example. So I mean, they can come on for the first time to understand the novelty of it, but to get them to repeatedly transact with you, to repeatedly undertake that transaction with you, I think it's about designing a very convenient customer experience. So I think what we have done is through our digital e-commerce platform, we are looking at specific use cases again. So if I can mention, say, the micro sellers in Pasar Gadong, for example. So what we're trying to build is a merchant services hub. So through a single interface, through a single platform, they can not only accept, say, online payments through the e-commerce marketplace, but also we acknowledge that they will always be, they will always need to be physically relevant wherever they're present. So for them, they're present at the Pasar Gadong. So it's about enabling them to now start accepting not only online orders, but also in-person orders. So I think, again, we look forward to the Digital Payments Hub for them to be able to lower down the cost of digital payments. So it's about creating in-store experience and bringing the online experience to offline channels.
Thanks, Denny. I guess going back to that, okay, making users want to use your, services. I think even before the pandemic, there were already big questions on the table for fintechs on the data privacy, cybersecurity, and there's also that issue of trust. Fintech companies, they're the new kid on the block. Banks have been there for as long as we can remember. They've built that trust with their customers. But for fintechs, they're new, so some people may not be inclined to use them. So my question to Ajit, if you're still there, are you still there, Ajit? How did Validus build that trust? I know that Validus was founded in 2015, but it's now the #1 leading fintech company in Singapore. So, and it has funded about more than 600 million you mentioned last time?
Correct.
Singapore dollars. So, yeah, maybe you can share in developing the trust for fintech firms between, the fintech firm and the company and the customers, I mean.
Great question, Hanisah. Great question. We often get asked this question in terms of how do we, as you called us, the new kids on the block, build trust among our customers. I'll try and answer that question in 3 parts. One in terms of building trust through just familiarity. One is, how you build trust with strong support from, regulators like yourselves, like the MBB or MAS or OJK. And third, what we specifically need to do as fintechs and what we did as Validus to build that trust among our customers. As you know, Hanisah, the fintech industry probably is about, in Asia, 5, 6 years, 7 years old at best. So to some extent, I think the fact that we've been around now for 6, 7 years has just the sheer familiarity and the number of fintechs that have emerged in our markets, in Singapore or Indonesia or some of the other ASEAN markets, has made us a lot more familiar in the landscape of the countries of customers than it was 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, if you asked a customer what is a fintech, they somehow associated us as being probably money lenders, unscrupulous, charging crazy rates of interest to customers. That has changed because, like I said, over the last 5, 6 years, there have been many fintechs and good fintechs that have cropped up, not just in China, but in all our countries, in Singapore, in Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So just time has built some amount of trust. I think the second element of building trust, Hanisah, is support from central banks like you, like the MAS, like the OJK. In both Singapore and in Indonesia, 2 countries that we are present in, we are regulated by the MAS and the OJK respectively. Now, when the central bank regulates fintechs like us or P2P lending platforms like us, that brings a huge amount of credibility to the public at large who are potential customers, be they SME borrowers or investors, that these institutions are being regulated by a central banking authority, and therefore that itself creates a huge amount of trust in the public because they don't start associating us with, fly-by-night people who could be unscrupulous because we are regulated entities. And I think I must commend the MAS on this because, they have been extremely supportive of fintech and platforms like us, as the OJK in Indonesia, and they've been their support and help and the regulations that they have brought into play, which have been very practical, very P2P platform supportive, have helped us, but as much given us credibility with the public at large in terms of the fact to put the right question to raise on why should we trust these guys, these fintechs. And the third thing, which is very individual, Hanisah, how we build trust is really by being fair and being extremely customer focused. We have 2 sets of customers, Hanisah. One is we have the SMEs who borrow from our platform, who need funding, And the second set of customers are investors or funders who invest in these SMEs funding needs. Now, as long as you are constantly meeting and hopefully exceeding the needs of both these customer sets, being fair to customers. Let me give you an example. If your SME borrower knows that you are charging him an interest rate for his borrowing that is competitive, that is not money lender like, where he gets a turnaround time of less than a day, he has money available on tap, we are fair, and he knows that if he has a problem, we are standing by him in good times and bad times, he's likely to come back to me for all his working capital needs. In fact, today we have a customer retention rate of almost 85%, which means 85% of my customers come back to me for their subsequent needs on a day in and day out, month after month basis. And I think that's the third element of creating trust, Hanisah. How good and how focused are you on your customers to exceed their needs every single time and are fair to them in all your dealings with them and make your dealings and interactions with them as seamless as possible, as efficient as possible, and as user-friendly as possible. And that's what we, Validus as a company, are constantly focused on. And that's what also creates that, what I call the third layer of trust with our customers. So, to summarize, one, there is just the familiarity with us being around for a longer time now, 6 years. Strong support from the regulators in the markets that we operate. It builds a big element of trust with the market. And third is extremely and strong, and I think Denny just mentioned it earlier, unscrupulous focus on our customer needs creates that trust with our customers, Validus' customers, which helps, push away any concerns that customers may have that these are not trustworthy companies, these fintechs.
Thanks, Ajit. I think that's the same kind of comment that I have been also hearing the past 3 days actually from the FinTech Festival. Close engagement between players and also the regulators is quite crucial, especially, in developing an appropriate regulatory framework, especially for fintechs. So I do agree with that message. And I think coming from AMBD, we've also been, we've been talking to the industry players and we've told them that we should keep this same close engagement, And I think you also mentioned just now, in terms of not just communication is also important, but I think, I think I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. There was just a lot that I had to absorb from your response. But okay, I think, how long do I have? 5 minutes. Okay. I guess from the conversation that we've had today, I think from Ajit and also from Denny, so the main message I could tell is that fintech is all about making people, putting people first. But, the banks are there to stay as well. I think coming from AMBD, we've also been saying that banks and fintechs, they should collaborate together. They should not see each other as, competitors. One is not there to compete with another, but you should, collaborate, help to think of creative solutions, I think. So maybe I'll just wrap it up. In closing, I think from all the 3 sessions that we've had today, perhaps what we can tell, COVID-19 was a game changer. It has forced us to transform when we were only planning to transition. So looking ahead, the government and AMBD, we've got a lot of work to do, but we cannot do it alone. So we do rely on industry players to help us. I mean, from the pandemic itself, we've seen how, collaborative efforts between both the public sector and private sector has taken us, miles in our journey when we probably just now were taking steps. So there's a saying, there are decades when nothing happens and there were weeks where decades happen. And I guess that saying could not be more apt than today.
Yeah.
So COVID-19 was indeed a wake-up call for all of us. And just to echo an earlier point from Yang Berhormat Pihin, let us together embrace this opportunity ahead of us and make tomorrow better than what we have today. So thank you everyone, and I hope you enjoyed today's sessions.
Thank you, Hanisah. Thank you, Denny and Irwan. Thank you for having me share my brief learnings and experiences.
Thank you very much, Hanisah, and also thank you very much to our panels of speakers. Thank you very much, Ajit. Now, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the World FinTech Festival 2020 Brunei Darussalam. We extend our utmost gratitude and thanks to Yang Berhormat Pihin, our guest of honor, and also the AMBD Board of Directors. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for your presence and participation in this auspicious event. We do hope that you have gained greater insight to help formulate and inclusive policies and strategies to meet the challenges in the digital era and future global economy. To those still with us on cyberspace, we look forward to welcoming you soon to the shores of Brunei Darussalam. So in the meantime, stay healthy and stay safe. With this, we end our event by inviting our guest of honor, Yang Berhormat Pihin Orang Kaya Seri Kerdana Datuk Seri Setia Dr. Haji Awang Abu Bakar bin Haji Apung, Minister of Home Affairs of Brunei Darussalam, come the Deputy Chairman of Autoriti Monetari Brunei Darussalam to visit the exhibition from our regulatory sandbox participants and enjoy the luncheon provided. Until next time, wallahu muwaffiq ila aqwamit tariq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.